My name is Herman. I'm 71 years old, and after losing my wife Linda, I thought nothing else would surprise me in life. But have you ever felt like someone just ignored your existence, as if all of a sudden his peace was treated as a borrowed favor? Well, that's exactly what I experienced, and it wasn't with a stranger, no. It was with my own son-in-law. Many will understand what I'm saying. You help, you give, you support, and one day you discover that for them, you are no longer worth anything. I built a lifetime with my hands, stone by stone, sacrifice by sacrifice. And when I finally bought my villa by the sea to rest in silence, he thought he could just invade, take over, make my home a playground. You may be wondering, what leads someone to treat an elderly person as if they were a nuisance? Or perhaps, did this man have the courage to react? Well, I promise you one thing. By the end of this story, you will understand how a well-calculated silence can teach the greatest lesson of life. Because what my son-in-law didn't know, it's just that I also know how to play in silence. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. The day my son-in-law called me saying, "I'm coming up with 15 people. Prepare everything. The master suite is Jessica's." It was the same day that something inside me died, and something else was born. He didn't ask, he commanded, as if my house were a free hotel, as if I were a butler without a voice. I listened in silence, and in that silence, the lesson he will never forget was born. All this happened without shouting, without fighting, without scandal, but it was a war, and it ended. If you have also felt left out by those who should respect you, I want to ask you, from the bottom of my heart, leave a like on this video, subscribe here to the channel, because telling this story hurts. But if there's someone on the other side listening carefully, I don't feel so alone anymore. Thank you for being here with me. Now, let me show you how a silent old man can turn the tide. I remember that day as if it were now. The sun was beating down the hood of the car when I parked at the entrance to the village. The Pacific breeze cut through the heat with a clean, salty smell that I only knew from short vacations, never of a home. In my hand, a bunch of keys, new, gleaming. And even at 71 years old, my heart beat like a boy's in front of the first bicycle. The house was exactly as I had dreamed. 2 well-distributed floors, light wood, washed stone, large windows that let the sea in without asking permission. The balcony was my favorite place. From there I could see the entire horizon, as if he were finally saying, "Now it's your turn." I didn't want luxury, I wanted silence. And I found it. I entered barefoot with respect. The walls still smelled of new paint. I put down the boxes slowly, took off my coat as if taking off armor. All my life I've built for others. Clipboard in hand, helmet on head, someone's project. There, for the first time, everything was mine. The floor I chose, the kitchen cabinets I dreamed of, the couch where no one was going to rush me. I sat right there on the living room floor. I opened a bottle of Chilean wine, which I kept for years without the courage to open. I put Bach on the ambient sound and let the music fill every corner of the house. At that moment, I fulfilled the promise I made to Linda at the hospital. I will build peace with what is left. You know, living after someone leaves is not living. It is to manage absence. After Emily was gone, and Linda was gone too, I was left with a pained silence full of echoes. But in that house, that silence finally sounded different. It was peace. It was rest. It was mine. I walked around the house calmly. Each room had a detail that reminded me of myself. The blue wall on the stairs, the corner fireplace that seemed useless, but that I wanted. The room was the most special. The oak wood bed, the handmade quilt I bought in Santa Fe. That was my refuge. In the kitchen, I took a crystal glass out of the package with all the care in the world. It was a gift from my sister, and I kept it for almost 10 years without using it. When I raised the glass to toast with myself, the cell phone rang. Bryce. On the screen, only his name. No photos. I never bothered to save more than necessary. I looked at that name for a good few seconds. I almost didn't answer, but I answered. Hi, I'm coming there, okay? We decided to spend a few weeks there in the village. I'm taking the crowd. About 15 people, no big deal. Prepare everything. Oh, the master suite is Jessica's, okay? She has a problem with her lower back. That was not an invitation. It was a sentence. I stood still, with my cell phone in my hand and the glass still in the air. He hung up without waiting for an answer. It was as if the house, which seconds before had looked like a temple, suddenly became a disputed territory. My ground shook, but not from emotion. It was out of anger. Have you ever had the feeling of conquering something with the sweat of your soul, and someone appears unceremoniously to take from you as if they were worthless? Have you ever felt that? It is as if the world said, old people don't need space. Old people don't deserve respect. If you've ever experienced something similar, he comments below. I've lived that, or it touched me, because this pain is not only mine, it belongs to many of us. I looked around and saw everything I had built with years of sacrifice. Every penny of that house came from my effort. I supported my daughter in Europe for 6 years. I paid every penny for Bryce's MBA at Berkeley. His car, I gave it. The entrance to his house, exit from my retirement fund. And even so, I never heard a "thank you, Dad." Never. Now, did he think he could invade the only space that was only mine? Bringing people I don't even know, as if I were the janitor? The glass trembled in my hand, but I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't make a scandal. I just sat down, and I was silent. But it was in this silence that something inside me changed, because that night I made the first decision. And you want to know what I did the next day? The next day, I woke up early. I went to the balcony with my black coffee and my head spinning. The sea was still there, calm, beautiful, breathing in waves. But inside me, something was beginning to boil. There were still boxes scattered around the room, books piled up in the hallway, sheets to be washed, and yet he said he was already on the road, coming with friends and children. 15 people, 15, as if this house were a convention center. I called back. He answered the third call with that hurried, superior voice he used when he wanted to appear important. I tried to be calm. He said that the house was not ready yet, that I didn't even have enough beds, that it would not be a good idea. His response was a slap without a hand. You're retired. You have nothing else to do. Get by. For a second I thought I had heard it wrong, but he repeated it, with mockery, with contempt. That stopped me. And before I said anything, he finished, "Oh, and the master suite is Jessica's, okay? She needs space. She doesn't sleep well in a small bed." Jessica, who didn't even know my daughter properly. Jessica, who calls me Mr. Herman, with that feigned intonation, as if talking to a stranger. Jessica, who thinks that life is solved with stories and a crystal pillow. The master suite was my sanctuary. Where was Linda's photo, where the smell of the quilt gave me the feeling of home? And now it was going to be a space for good energy and yoga videos for the internet. I felt my spine harden. You know that shiver that rises slowly when the soul says, "It's over." That was it. I stood there looking out the window. A seagull landed on the balcony railing and stared at me, as if it knew. The phone was still in my hand, but Bryce had already hung up. He didn't even wait for my answer, because deep down he thought he didn't even need her. I thought I could do whatever I wanted. That old retiree doesn't say no. I stayed there for long minutes. Silence. Just the sound of the waves, but the silence this time was not peace. It was the sound of indignation growing inside. The old man he thought he could push, shut up, ignore, was still here, alive, thinking. And at that very moment, I understood that he had crossed the line. The line that not even children should cross. Because when you break into the one place where a man finds peace, you're not just taking a room, you are taking away from him the right to exist with dignity. And that, my son, has a price. And the question that kept hammering in my head was he really prepared to pay this price? That night, I opened another bottle of wine. I sat in the armchair in the living room with the light low and stared at Emily's photo. It was there, in the lightwood picture frame, with that corner smile she made when she wanted to convince me of something. Beautiful, sweet, intelligent. My daughter was my greatest pride, and it was for her that I endured so long in silence, because deep down I thought that by helping her husband I was taking care of some part of her that was still left. But now, there, with the glass in hand, the taste of the wine seemed sour, because what was once sacrifice with purpose now seemed to me exploitation. Bryce was never one to say thank you, and each favor he received seemed to become an acquired right. The MBA at Berkeley, $40,000. I remember the check. He said it would be the turning point of his life, that he would pay everything back in 2 years. It's been more than 10. The imported car for Jessica? He convinced me that she needed security since she was pregnant. Bought, in sight. And when the boy was born, not even my name was given as the second. The down payment on the house in Scottsdale, furniture, health insurance, even late electricity bills. It all came to me, and everything was packaged in beautiful language. It's for the family, Mr. Herman. But when Emily fell ill, it was different. I was the one who paid for every penny of the treatments, the trips to Houston, the medicines. Bryce disappeared, saying he couldn't leave work. And even so, I found time to post a photo with Jessica in Laguna Beach, drinking expensive wine. When my daughter left, I looked at him and said, "Now it's just us." And he just shook his head, no hug, without a word. Just that calculated coldness of someone who never had a soul in relationships. The truth is that I was useful, and that's why they tolerated me. And now, with this visit with 15 people, I understood once and for all. It was not a request. It was another invasion. Another emergency disguised as a family reunion, an attempt to turn my house into a stage of convenience, and my name in a footer of receipt. I sat for hours, mentally going over every favor, every transfer, every conversation I tried to start, and he ended with, "I'm busy." It was always like this. He spoke to me as if he were talking to a doorman, in a hurry, with boredom, with neglect, and I accepted, for the love of my daughter's memory, for fear of losing even the remains of what was left of it. But that night, with her picture in my hands, I swore, never again. Bryce mistook silence for weakness, and he thought generosity was a sign of stupidity. Little did he know that while he called me an outdated old man, I kept all the receipts, and not just a bank. He kept the gestures, the silences, the looks, because the memory of a betrayed man is like fire sleeping under the earth. And there, in that room, looking at that photo, I felt that the embers were starting to light up. And you want to know the first spark I decided to release? I tried to call the next day, insisted. I would like to at least establish some rule, some line of respect. When he answered, Bryce said he couldn't speak. Then he sent a short audio. "I'm already on the road, Mr. Herman. I'm getting there. Relax." Relax? Relax for what? To have my house invaded as if it were an inn without a gate? I barely had time to process when I heard the sound of the tires on the gravel. 4 SUVs, all black, big, noisy. It looked like an entourage of famous people. They stopped in front of my garage as if they owned the world. The doors opened and people of all kinds came out. Girls in gym clothes, boys with caps turned up, children screaming, drink boxes, supermarket bags, flamingo-shaped pool floats, camera tripod, even ring light brought. A girl I've never seen in my life turned around and said loudly, "This house has a luxury Airbnb vibe, right? Total Pinterest." I was standing on the porch, still with the key in my pocket, as if I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Jessica walked past me with a fake smile, patted me twice on the shoulder and said, "Hi, Rick. Everything is beautiful here. You are an angel." My name is not Rick. It never was. Bryce came right behind, didn't even look me in the eye. He said, "Guys are going to stay for about 3 weeks. Try not to make noise too early, okay? Jessica meditates in the morning." I wanted to answer. I wanted to speak loudly, but his voice froze. A man in wet swim trunks came into my kitchen as if it were his own, opened the fridge, grabbed a beer and burped. He burped. Inside my house, in my kitchen. And when one of the children, I think it was someone's son, I don't know who, ran across the room and bumped into the vase I brought from Italy in the 80s, then yes. The silence in me began to crack. The vase fell in slow motion, a gift from Linda on our first international trip. It broke into 5 pieces. No one apologized. The boy's mother laughed and said, "It's just a vase, guys, relax. That's when you understand that you've lost respect. It's not when they yell at you. It's when they laugh at things that hurt you. And look, I'm here opening my heart, telling my story. If you're listening, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, because I still have a lot of things saved to tell you, because there are things that we only learn after losing too much." I went to the room. I closed the door. I leaned against the wall as if my body could no longer bear the weight of shame, of anger, of disrespect. The house I built to be my sanctuary was now a scene for selfies, loud laughter, scattered dirt. I stood there, sitting on the floor, listening to the voices outside. Is the pool heated? Is there a barbecue? We're going to do an after here tomorrow. And you know the worst? They hadn't even asked me if they could come. They just came, like I'm the butler of a free resort. At that moment, I stopped owning the house, but only on the outside, because inside, I was starting to build something else, an idea, a plan, and maybe you already do. At this point, I wasn't just going to watch it anymore, because the next day, I decided to get up and open a drawer that I hadn't opened in years. And you want to know what I got out of it? The next morning, I woke up to voices coming from the hallway. Voices and hurried steps, loud laughter, the sound of sandals hitting the wooden floor. The door to my room was ajar. I got up slowly, still in my pajamas, and went to the living room. Bryce had a towel on his shoulder, drinking coffee straight from the thermos I left on the counter, without asking, without even realizing that it was mine. Jessica walked past me with her wet bikini dripping on the floor and a cell phone in her hand. "Guys, the master suite is everything. This light here is perfect for morning yoga. I'm going to record a reel in a quick way before class." And it did. He entered my room. My body froze. I went after it. I opened the door. She was already sitting on my bed, cross-legged, stretching her arms in a meditative pose. The sheet I bought with Linda, the Egyptian cotton one we picked out together in a small shop in Carmel, was wet. Chlorine dripped. "Jessica, this suite is mine. It's my room. You can't use it like that." She didn't even raise her head. He just said, "Hi, Mr. Herman. It's quick. I just need a moment of centering." At that time, Bryce appeared behind me and said with that fake, wide smile with a smell of irony, "Relax, old man. You can stay in the guest room, okay? It also has a bed." The phrase came like a kick in the chest. The guest room, room that I haven't even fixed yet. Where I left the boxes with Linda's clothes, where I keep my books, my old papers, my dusty memories. "This bed is mine. This room is mine," I tried to say once again. Bryce shrugged. "You yourself said you wanted peace, so give us this peace." I stood there watching my bed become a backdrop. Jessica started talking with her cell phone in her hand. "Guys, take a deep breath with me. Peace, light, alignment. Peace?" She spoke in peace. Inside my room, sitting wet on my bed, with my sheets soaked and my dignity trampled by someone who never called me father. I went back to the hallway. The world seemed blurry. Voices came from everywhere. People in the kitchen, music coming out of a sound box, children running, someone washing their feet in the bathroom sink. But nothing hurt me as much as that. My room. Invaded. Turned into a story setting. I locked myself in the back room. I closed the door. I sat on the floor between the boxes. I looked around. My things were there. Linda's letters, Emily's old notebooks, an old blanket that still kept the smell of home. The feeling was one of exile. And it's curious how the greatest pain in life sometimes doesn't come from screaming or slapping. It comes from someone calmly saying that you can stay in the guest room, as if this were not a humiliation, as if this were normal. I stayed there for hours, no hunger, without strength. But little by little that pain was transformed. The humiliation turned to anger, and the anger after a while turned to clarity, because if they thought they could even take the place where I rest, so I needed to remind them that I was still alive, and maybe it was time to use what I knew how to keep so well. And do you have any idea what an old man with memory and patience can do in silence? It took me a while to get out of that guest room. It wasn't just tiredness, it was grief. I fight for everything that house represented to me, or rather, for everything it had ceased to represent. But after a few hours in the dark, between boxes and memorabilia, something inside me hardened. And when I got up, I felt that it was not the same man who had entered there. I walked through the house slowly, as if observing a plot of land after the fire. They were laughing in the room. Loud music. Bottles on top of my piano. A girl danced with dirty feet on the Persian carpet that I inherited from my father. Bryce was in the kitchen, cutting meat on top of Linda's marble board. I stopped at the door. They looked at me and started talking again. I was invisible there. I went straight to the office. It was the only room that was still closed, untouched. I took the key in my pocket, went in and closed it inside. I took a deep breath. On the side wall, the safe. I put the combinations slowly. Click. There they were. The deed to the house, my will. The bank statements of the transfers I made to Bryce. The proof of payments for the children's school, Jessica's car, the MBA. I kept the deed and some papers inside my jacket. I took the landline, because the cell phone there already seemed to be part of their world, not mine, and dialed 911. Emergency. What's your situation? Good evening. My name is Herman. I own a house in Malibu. Some people have come in here and refused to leave. They are not invited. They are using my house as if it were a hotel. Sir, do you know these people? I do, unfortunately, but they are not allowed to be here. I am the owner. I have the deed in hand. The attendant asked for calm, confirmed the address, and said she would send a car soon. I thanked him and hung up. I stood there, sitting in the leather chair my wife bought me for my 60th birthday. I looked out the window. The sun was setting over the sea. It was beautiful, as it always was. But inside me, the sky was already in a storm. Outside, a voice shouted, "Has anyone seen my white bikini? Are we going to have a barbecue tomorrow, Bryce?" Oh, this house is absurd, bro. This is a movie set. I closed my eyes. The sound of laughter seemed louder than the waves, but in my chest it was silence, and within that silence something firm grew. I wasn't going to beg, I wasn't going to scream, I would only remember who I was. Because there is a point in our lives when fear gives way to clarity, and when that happens, you don't hesitate anymore. You act. And I'll tell you something right from my heart. The most remarkable moment in this story is yet to come. If you've made it this far, don't let go of my hand. There is still a lot to happen. When I locked the office door and sat down again with the papers on the table, I felt a strange peace. It was not the same peace as the day I first entered that house. It was another, the peace of those who finally understood that they do not need to accept everything in the name of love. The sky outside turned orange, and soon purple. Night fell slowly, but the night that came to them, oh, this one would be different. And have you ever wondered how a police visit can become the first step to rewrite your history? The first knock on the door came firm, dry. Bryce. "Let's talk like adults, mister." "Herman," he said, as if that title now served as a shield, as if calling me sir cleaned up the years of abuse, the crossed words, the disrespect. I didn't answer. I remained silent. my eyes fixed on the scripture on the table. My hands were calm. It was as if everything that disturbed me had already been ordered within me. The second beat was softer. "Jessica, you're being cruel, Rick," forced a tone of tears, sniffling behind the door as if trying to put together a scene. I remained silent. They didn't know that silence, for those who have lost everything, is not empty. It's strength. Outside, the voices intertwined, confused. Someone asked what was going on. Another commented that it was getting weird. And then the sirens came. The first person to notice was one of Jessica's friends who was looking out the window. "Guys, the police!" I heard hurried footsteps. A glass fell to the floor. Someone ran to the door. Jessica started screaming. "He called the police. My God, he went crazy. It's just a visit." Bryce tried to maintain his posture. He spoke loudly, firmly, but with nervousness stuck in his throat. "This is a family thing. It's not a police case. Let's solve it here." It was at that moment that I got up from my chair. Calmly, I took the documents. I opened the door. The hallway was packed with tense faces, people holding cell phones, others murmuring. Jessica looked at me as if I were a soap opera villain. Bryce crossed his arms, trying to look in control. I looked at all of them, one by one, firmly, with the dignity that only a betrayed man knows how to carry. And then I said, "This is not family. This is invasion." The doorbell rang. 2 Los Angeles County officers were at the door. I presented the documents. They came in. Their authority changed everything. Suddenly, those who felt they owned the house were now looking for where to leave the glass, where to sit without looking guilty. The tone of the voices dropped. The smiles disappeared. The police were respectful to me. They asked if I had proof that they were here without my permission. I showed him the scripture. I pointed to the suitcase still closed in the guest room. I showed the messages on my cell phone. One of them turned to Bryce and said, "Sir, if the landlord is asking you to leave, that needs to be respected." Jessica tried to interrupt. "But he's elderly. He must be confused. It was all arranged." The other officer only replied, "The confusion here seems to come from disrespect, and disrespect has consequences." That's when Bryce changed his tune. He tried to get closer. He lowered his voice. "Herman, let's talk, man to man. You don't need that. Look at everything we've been through together." And that's when I saw it. He didn't talk to me as family. He spoke like someone who had lost control of what he thought he had in his hands. He never saw me as a father-in-law, much less as a man. He saw me as a bench with legs. Moment of reflection. And there's something I need to ask you now who are here listening to me. Have you ever felt this kind of loneliness? The one that only appears when you realize that someone only approached you out of interest. That affection was a facade, and respect was only as long as it lasted. Request for comment. If you've experienced something like this, comment there with a "I know how it is" or "I understand you." Because this pain creates a scar in a place that we didn't even know it could hurt. In the living room, one of the young men who was staying asked in a low voice, "Do we really have to go?" Bryce looked at him, not knowing what to answer. I stayed there, firm. The officer looked at them and said, "You have 15 minutes. It was as if time froze. I saw bags being packed in a hurry, buoys emptied in the garden, Jessica throwing clothes into the suitcase as if she were the victim of the story. Bryce in the corner, calling someone, whispering, but nothing else hurt me. Their shame was my justice, and what no one there knew was that what would come after this departure would teach an even deeper lesson. Because kicking someone out of your house is easy. It is difficult to show that what was lost, it will never be returned. And you have an idea what happens when shame hits. And the house is empty? I had never seen such a full house empty so quickly. The clock on the wall read 7:12 p.m. when the first boy came out with a backpack on his back, saying, "Thanks there," as if he were leaving any barbecue. One by one they began to move. Some grumbled, Others snorted loudly, others just lowered their eyes, perhaps for the first time. A couple was arguing about who was going to take the bottles of wine that were still closed. Bryce tried to disguise his despair with clipped orders. Take only what is necessary. Leave it there. Quick. Jessica was crying for real now, but it wasn't sadness. It was frustration of seeing the staging collapse. His eyes were smudged with makeup, trying to justify his crying to one of the policemen. We just wanted to rest. He didn't even warn that he was going to call the police. The officer did not respond. I was concentrating on the paper I filled out with my name. My name. When Bryce tried to approach him again, perhaps thinking a more emotional tone would work, he dropped the phrase he held like a knife. Emily would be ashamed of you. It seemed like a sure blow, but it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt because there I understood how much he never met my daughter. I looked him in the eye and held out the deed to the house. Don't use my daughter's name to justify your greed. He stood still, with his hand outstretched, not knowing what to do with that paper. He lowered his head. For the first time I saw silence inside him, but it was a silence of defeat, not of reflection. SUVs began to leave the garage one by one, the wheels crushing the gravel in anger. The last car was Bryce's. He stopped in front of the sidewalk. He rolled down the window, looked at me. I was standing in the doorway, arms crossed. He said nothing. Neither did he. But his look was that of someone who knew that, this time, he lost. I closed the door calmly. The house was now mine just another time. But it was not the same. On the ground, wet footprints. In the living room, dirty bowls, a torn cushion. The smell of cheap perfume mixed with beer and suntan lotion. But above all, there was silence. A dense, sacred silence. I went to my room. My room. The bed was a mess. The sheets stained with makeup. The pillow thrown on the floor. But on the nightstand, intact, was Emily's photo. I picked it up carefully, wiped it with the hem of my shirt, and sat on the edge of the bed with it in my hands. I stayed there for a long time, without thinking about anything, just looking at that smile. Sometimes, justice comes without sound. It comes in the form of a closed door, with a suitcase being packed in a hurry, of silence forced by those who have always screamed. I got up, went down to the living room, and went to the bar. I grabbed a bottle of aged whiskey that I had saved for a special occasion. If it wasn't a special occasion, then I didn't know what was. I poured 2 shots, one for me, and one I left it there in front of her photo. I sat in the armchair. The sun was already gone. The house was dark, but I didn't turn on any lights. He liked pitch. From the sound of the sea returning to occupy the space, from the echo of the clean house, I took a deep breath. Peace had returned. But it was not the end, because I knew Bryce, and I knew he wouldn't accept losing like that. He was moved under control, and lost control turns into anger. And that's why, even with locked doors, I knew that war wasn't over yet. And you know what? I was already prepared for the next battle, but you have no idea what happens. When does the one who underestimated you decide to face you for the last time? That night, the whole house seemed to breathe with me. Silence was not just the absence of voices. It was a presence, a kind of respect that only comes back when the last intruder leaves. I walked through the rooms, slowly, barefoot, feeling each step as a gesture of reconquest. But there was also a pent-up anger so strong that it hurt in my hands. I took a cloth, a bucket of hot water, and started cleaning the floor. With each wet footprint I erased, it seemed that I also rubbed some of the humiliation they had left me there. It was more than dirt. It was as if every trace was an insult. In the living room, near the fireplace, I found a forgotten wine glass with pink lipstick on the rim. I threw it in the trash. In the upstairs bathroom, there was glitter on the mirror. A hairbrush stuck to the curtain, a bikini hanging from the doorknob. Everything was a trace of disrespect. But what hurt me the most He went to remember Bryce's look when he left. It wasn't an embarrassed look. It was hateful, of wounded ego, of someone who does not accept being put in his place. He did not leave regretful. He left promising in silence that he would return, and that was what worried me. After cleaning the last corner of the kitchen, I sat back in the office. The light of the lamp was soft, and the sound of the sea came far away, like a whisper. I opened the documents folder. I started to separate the roles: receipts, contracts, proof of TEDs. I had written everything down, by order, per annum, for reason. The MBA at Berkeley, $40,000. The entrance to the house in Scottsdale, $32,000. Jessica's car, $26,000. The furniture, medical bills, the children's school, birthday trip, dental emergency, difficult month, 12 years of looting camouflaged with affection. I added it all up, $292,480. But it wasn't the number that made me stop. It was a small yellowed receipt from 12 years ago. It was from the time when Emily was still alive, a deposit from Bryce of $300, the only one, and next to it, handwritten, refund, Mother's Day gift. That's when I understood. What hurt me the most was not money. It was contempt, the certainty they had that I would never say no. I took a deep breath. I took a clean sheet, a pen, and I did. Dear Emily, today the house was silent again. But it's not the same silence you knew. It's a tired silence. Hurt. A silence that screams inside. They came here without asking. They slept in our bed. They used our cutlery. They stepped on our balcony as if it were theirs. I was silent for a long time, because I thought that being present was more important than being respected. What love it was to accept everything. But today I know. I was too good, and they mistook it for weakness. Would you be ashamed of what they did? Or would I be ashamed of myself for letting it get this far? I don't know. But today, for the first time, I set a limit. And maybe it's too late to fix everything, but it's not too late not to allow more. With love, your father. I read it aloud. Only once. Folded, I placed the letter inside her mother's favorite book on the hallway shelf. Not to keep, but to remember and look. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. I closed my eyes, and in that darkness I thought about everything that could still happen, because when a resentful man finds himself defeated, he doesn't give up. He plans. And that's why the next day, something unexpected arrived in the mail. And you know what can happen. When does an envelope become a threat? The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, right after breakfast. It was brown, heavy, with no visible sender. When I opened it, I saw the name of a law firm printed at the top of the sheet. Bryce had sent me a formal letter. The content, a request disguised as a threat. He said he was deeply hurt by the way he was treated, that he thought it was unfair to be expelled from his family's home, and that he was waiting for a retraction. The last sentence made me laugh to myself. I hope we can resolve this amicably before further measures are necessary. Other measures? That man. I still thought I was in charge. I didn't waste time. I grabbed the briefcase with the documents and called the only man I would trust at this moment, Harold Levine, my longtime friend, serious lawyer, man of ethics. We met in San Diego, back in the days when I could barely take a vacation. He answered my call in a firm voice, as always. Herman, you don't call me to talk trash. What's going on? The next day, I was sitting in his office. The room was exactly the same as it had been since the last time I was there. Dark wood bookcase, heavy curtains, smell of coffee and old paper. I spread the documents on the table. He read it, one by one, in silence. Sometimes he frowned, sometimes he let out a low, When I finished explaining everything, from the invasion to the letter received, he took off his glasses, looked at me with that way of someone who is going to say something important, and said, "You may not get your lap time, but you can make sure it never invades your world again." Those words kept pounding in my head like a church bell, because that was exactly what it was. It was not about revenge. It was defense. It was protection. It was a scream that does not come out of the throat, but through the signature under a paper. We prepared an extrajudicial notification together, an official document with letterhead, clauses, articles, technical language, but which said, in short, any attempt to return to my property without authorization will be considered an invasion, with legal support for immediate removal. I didn't stop there. I took advantage of the fact that I was there in front of old Harold and asked, "I want to review my will." He arched his eyebrows but didn't ask why. He just picked up the right rolls. And there, with a steady hand, I began to rewrite the fate of what I will leave when I am gone. Jessica, Bryce. The names were erased with black ink. In its place, the scholarship foundation that Linda and I have always dreamed of creating. Emily. She was already gone. But her memory, yes, I guaranteed that it would be honored. I signed slowly, and when I looked up, Harold looked at me with respect. "Herman, this is not just paper. It is protection, it is justice, and it's peace. And that's why, if you've come this far with me, let me tell you something with an open heart. The strongest moment in this story is yet to come. Because when justice comes in silence, she usually screams in the heart of those who did not expect her." On the way out, Harold walked me to the door. He hugged me as someone who understands the weight I carry on my back. And he said, before closing, "Now you're armored, and the next move, it's yours. And have you ever wondered what happens when those who treated you like a doormat realize that they don't step on you anymore?" I returned home with Harold's papers stored in a brown envelope, the kind that seems to carry more than documents. They carried decision, weight, past. I sat down at the kitchen table, prepared a strong coffee, and pulled out that old folder where I kept everything involving Bryce. It was not disorganization, on the contrary. I have always been methodical. Each receipt had a date, reason, even a handwritten note to remind me of the reason for the deposit. Only this time I decided to cross some dates, take the bank statements and compare them with what, theoretically, had been used to pay for Emily's treatment in the last months of her life. And it was there that something began to stink. An $18,000 deposit that I had made directly to Bryce's account on a day when he said that Emily's health insurance did not cover an urgent procedure. I remembered it as if it were today. He called crying. He said it was a matter of days, that he needed to act fast, that she deserved a chance. But cross-referencing that same amount with a spreadsheet of transactions that I managed to pull from the bank, and here comes the detail, because I was the credit guarantor of some of his accounts, I found the amount used the following week as a down payment for a company registered in Arizona, an LLC. In whose name? Jessica. I opened the browser, searched for the name of the company, and there it was. Golden Days Digital Media, an influencer marketing firm based in Scottsdale, Arizona. On Instagram, Jessica posed in designer clothes, trips, dinners. Behind the scenes, my daughter was dying, and they were opening a luxury business with the money I borrowed against my own insurance. At that moment, everything stopped. I closed my eyes, breathed, but his chest seemed pierced, as if the air that entered no longer found space. Betrayal has many faces, but this was the worst. Use Emily's suffering, the desperation of a father, to pay for the spotlight and camera. I sat there with my hand on the papers, and look, there are memories that we think we overcome, but it only takes 2 numbers in an account to open a wound that has never closed. No. Some memories are like strong perfume. Even after the person leaves, the smell remains, and it doesn't. If you have any memories like this, that never left you no matter how much time has passed, share it with me in the comments. Sometimes dividing what you weigh helps to carry, even if it's just saying, "I lived that too." It's already a way of saying that pain has company. I printed everything. the company's invoices, the receipts, the names, the dates, and I wrote by hand on top of the first page. They used me while my daughter died. I kept it in the same envelope where the copy of the will was. I went up to the room, but I couldn't sleep. The night seemed alive. The house breathed with the sea, but inside me it was stormy. And what kept me standing? It was no longer anger. It was clarity. Because the next conversation with Bryce, it wouldn't be about forgiveness. And have you ever stopped to think about what happens? When does silence become a sentence? The sun was already beginning to set when I heard 3 dry knocks on the door. I knew it was him. He didn't have to look through the peephole. Bryce's presence had a weight that the ground knew. I took a deep breath. I walked to the door with the firmness of someone who has already decided everything inside. Open. There he was, alone, dress shirt unbuttoned around his neck, his eyes sunken as if he hadn't slept in days. I had a thin envelope in my hand, perhaps thinking I would be moved by some hastily written letter. "Herman, we need to talk." The words came out in a forced, rehearsed tone, as if he wanted to repeat a phrase he had already used in other manipulations. But this time, it wouldn't work. I didn't answer. I just opened a step to the side, making it clear that he would not enter. We stayed there, on the porch of the house he tried to take from me, the same balcony from which I saw the sea every day. But at that moment, the only horizon that mattered to me was that of truth. "I brought this here," he held out the envelope, "to show you that we interrupted. You don't have to. I've seen it all." I turned my back, entered, and returned with a bundle of leaves in my hand. I gave it to him, printed documents, extracts, Jessica's company, the movement of money, the dates. "You used Emily's name. He used her disease. And while I was paying for morphine and physical therapy, you were setting up a video set in Arizona." He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He stared at the paper as if he saw his own shame written out loud. I just wanted to secure the boy's future. You destroyed the gift." I spoke softly, but each syllable weighed like a hammer. "She was dying, and you thought it was a good time to open a blogger's CNPJ. You lied, Bryce." And he lied with blood on the phone. His eyes began to fill, his shoulders slumped. The tears came. But I didn't move. I stood still, hard, like a door that closes slowly. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "I got lost." "No, you have revealed yourself." The silence between us grew stronger than any scream. And maybe he expected me to cry too, that I stretched out my arms, that I said, "Okay," as I so many times. But no. "Bryce, you don't come back here, not even to seek forgiveness." He shuddered, as if only there understood the weight of the sentence. "Herman, please, go away." I turned my back, went inside and closed the door. Without knocking, no rush, I just closed it. And as the handle turned on the latch, I felt that an era of my life ended there. But what I didn't know is that an altered will was about to become the beginning of something even bigger. Do you have any idea what happens when the last word of an old man becomes an inheritance that no one expected? 2 days after that last conversation, I received the delivery confirmation. Bryce had signed the receipt of the judicial notice. Direct document, without room for doubt. He was forbidden to set foot on that property again, or to try any kind of contact with me, personal, electronic, telephone, whatever. Any attempt would be considered a legal violation, with all the consequences that come with it. It was not an easy decision, but it was the only possible one. He had already crossed all lines, spat on every form of respect, even used my daughter's name as a shield. This was no longer a family quarrel. It was protection. Justice. On the same day, a friend of Linda's, who was still following Jessica on social media, sent me a screenshot. Jessica had made a post on Instagram, one of those with a beige background and cursive, trying to sound profound. "Sad to see how old people can be so toxic, but time shows who is who." I read it, breathed, print, and I did. I didn't answer, not even with words, not even with thought, because when you respond to poison, you poison yourself together. And I was clean. For the first time in a long time, clean. The next day I went to the registry office. I took with me the deed to the house, Harold's documents, and the New Testament. I asked for the transfer of ownership to an irrevocable lifetime trust. The name of the village was now tied to an entity with no heirs. This means that neither sons, nor grandchildren, nor sons-in-law or daughters-in-law, no one could lay hands on that piece of ground. The house was now armored, not only by law, but by memory. In the paperwork, the fate of the village was recorded. At the end of my life, it will be donated to a project for the emotional rehabilitation of grieving elderly. A rest center where other men and women who have lost their companions can see the sea, breathe in peace, and rebuild their souls. I thought about how Linda would have smiled if she had known that. I thought about how proud Emily would have been. And at that moment, there in the leather chair of the registry office, I understood that what I had done was not revenge. It was justice, and more than that, it was freedom. The villa, where they threw me in the corner of the guest room. Now it was a sanctuary. It was fortress, and no one else would cross that door without deserving it. But most impressively was yet to come, because when the news about the Lifetime Fund leaked, something unexpected happened and changed everything again. I don't usually use social media much. I've never been good with these things, these apps full of brilliance, people showing a life that deep down no one really lives. But Harold, he accompanies it. He said it was important for me to know what was happening. And he was the one who sent me the screenshots. Bryce had made a video. One of those videos with a dramatic soundtrack in the background, teary eyes, trying to look like a martyr. He told a distorted version of the story, saying that he had been kicked out of the family home by a spiteful father-in-law, that the children, my grandchildren, cried with the cruelty. He said that his wife, Jessica, was devastated, that she just wanted a safe place to create content and live in peace. I read it. I took a deep breath, and I did what I've been learning to do. I didn't react. I didn't comment. I didn't defend myself. Harold only sent another message, along with the screenshots of the comments. The truth is revealed in silence. And he was right, because there, under the video full of rehearsed words, the voices that really saw the story began to pop. People who remembered everything. Emily's friends. People who knew the truth. Did you use your deceased wife's name to open a company in the name of the current one? This father-in-law paid for his whole life. Shame on you. He wants to live in luxury, but he doesn't want to work. This man is an example of dignity. I wish I had a father like that. And I stood there, sitting on the porch, with my cell phone turned off, looking at the sea, thinking about how funny the world is. Lying can be loud, full of effects. But the truth does not need to be explained. She just needs to wait. And if you've been listening to this piece of my story so far, let me ask you something with affection. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Like this video and sign up. And let's make this story reach those who need it. Because look, there are many elderly people out there being treated as a remnant, and no one is a leftover after a lifetime of surrender. I didn't respond to Bryce. I didn't send a message. I didn't respond. The only thing I did was put one more lock on the gate and carefully keep the copy of the deed in the back of the drawer. But there, in silence, I began to see the weight of shame fall on his shoulders. The audience, which had previously applauded him, began to move away. He lost followers. Jessica's company had contracts cancelled, and that image of a modern and spiritual couple was breaking like glass in slow motion. And the most curious, it's just that his next reaction wasn't to try to fix it. It was doing something even lower, and what he tried to do, It will take your breath away. The first thing I did after all the paperwork was finished was to change the curtains in the living room. It sounds silly, but for me it was a symbol of a new beginning. The old ones, beige and heavy, reminded us of the days when the house was invaded. The new ones were white, light, let the sun in, as if the world had been washed from within. I also painted my bedroom wall, a shade of light blue, almost sky, which matched the peace I finally felt when I went to bed. They were small gestures, but they had the weight of an inner revolution. I didn't talk to anyone else in that family. Not Bryce, not Jessica, not the friends who left me in the dark when I needed it, and for the first time it didn't hurt me. Silence was no longer an absence. It was a choice. I started walking every day to the Malibu Pier at 6 in the morning. The air on the coast is different at this time. Silent, humid, full of promises that don't scream. I watched the seagulls, sat on the bench next to the old fisherman who didn't say much and just stood there, breathing. At the downtown bakery, where I usually stop to get my whole wheat bread and black coffee without sugar, a girl approached me once. As a young man, he must have been in his early 30s. He looked at me, hesitated, and asked politely, "I'm sorry. Are you the lord of the village? We saw the case on the networks." I just smiled. I nodded. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no, because the truth sometimes speaks through gestures. I returned home that morning with the bag of bread still warm on my arm and sat on the porch. The house seemed to breathe with me. There were no more screams, no doors slamming, no people taking pictures of the sunset to post with an empty caption. Just the sound of the sea and time passing at the right pace. No, the greatest victory of my life was not keeping the house. It was learning to say no. It was looking in the mirror and seeing a man who survived it all, the loss, the betrayal, the loneliness, and yet managed to build peace. And if you've been following me this far, I'll tell you with all my soul, there's still a part of this story that will turn you inside out. Because what Bryce did next, it has crossed any line imaginable. Can you imagine one last blow, coming from someone who has already lost everything? That morning, the postman walked up the cobblestone path as calmly as always, but when he put the envelope in my hand, I knew it was neither a bill nor an advertisement. The handwriting on the back made me cringe. It was Jacob's, Emily's brother, my ex-son-in-law. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. There were years of silence, not because of a direct fight, but because of emotional distance, the kind that is born when each one deals with pain in their own way. I opened the letter with steady hands. He started directly. "I heard what happened to the village. I'm sorry, Herman. It took me a while, but I'm writing now because I understood the value of certain things. If you allow it, I would like to visit you." I spent some time with the paper on my lap, looking at the horizon. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't cry either. I just took a deep breath. That request was not just about a visit. It was about the chance to rebuild some link with what was left of my history. At the end of the afternoon, I went to the closet, dusted Linda's old chair, and put it next to me on the balcony. The next morning, I went to the downtown store and bought 2 new mugs, white enamel with black border, simple but firm, like the conversations that life owes us. On the way back, I calmly prepared coffee, opened the windows, let the breeze in. The sun pierced the glass like a warm embrace. Maybe life isn't about starting all over again. Maybe it's about looking fondly at what's left after the storm, and value. And it was when I was putting the mugs in the closet that the phone on the wall rang. And what I heard on the other end of the line, it was the last thing I expected. I walked to the beach that morning barefoot and light-hearted. The sun had barely fully risen, and the world still seemed to be dozing off. It was my favorite time. The sea had not yet been invaded by voices, cameras, or boards. It was just him, whole, looking back at me. I sat on the sand, in the same part where Linda and I used to stop when we came here just to visit, dreaming of a piece of peace that could one day be ours. And there, as if she were still by my side, I started talking. in a low but firm voice, like someone who already knows all the answers, but still deserves to hear every word. Beautiful. I tried. I tried to honor everything you believed in. I tried to be generous as you taught me. I tried to keep the family together, even when it was already in pieces. Maybe I made too many mistakes trying to get too much right. But today I understood. I looked at the sea. The waves seemed to respond with a meaningful silence. You always said, being good does not mean letting yourself be broken. And it took me a while, love. It took me a while to understand this. I thought that to love was to give up everything. I thought that being old was to be quiet. I thought dignity was to endure in silence. But no. Dignity is knowing where love ends and abuse begins. It's knowing when to close the door and, if necessary, changing the lock. I was silent for a while, breathing in the smell of salt and memory. They mistook my kindness for weakness, Linda, but I was able to show that even the quietest of men has a limit, and that when this limit is exceeded, he doesn't scream. He gets up. He acts. I closed my eyes. The sand was still cold beneath me, but the chest, hot. For the first time in many years, hot. I didn't know what would come next. Emily's brother had not yet appeared. The phone from the day before still echoed in my head, and what I heard on that call, well, that will still have to wait a while to be told. But there, at that moment, sitting in front of the same sea that saw me arrive with moving boxes and a broken heart, I knew it was another man. The silence around me no longer hurt. Now, he protected me, but that phone call, that one, I would change everything again. Can you imagine who was on the other end of the line? That same day I returned from the beach, I sat at the kitchen table with my black-covered notebook, the one where I write when words hurt more than silence. I took a deep breath, picked up the blue pen, and wrote slowly. I was sheltered. They made a storm. I was a bridge. They stepped on. I went down. They left me in the rain. But I was the one who built the roof. And there I closed the last chapter of what once hurt me. Today, the village remains firm, silent, and full of light at dusk. The sea still dances the same way, but now it talks to me without hurting me. Bryce did not return. He never tried to contact him again. Jessica followed the same path, and those who watched from afar disappeared along with the interest. As for me, I'm still here, painting the porch, watering the plants, and serving 2 cafes every Sunday, even if one of them remains unowned. Emily's brother came to visit me that same week. We sat and cried and laughed, like 2 men who had been lost in time, but still knew where to find each other. You know, life taught me hard, that not all kindness will be repaid, but it is still worth being good. Because being good is not about the other, it's about you. About the peace you feel when, even after everything, you look in the mirror and manage to respect yourself. I've learned that saying no is also an act of love, first for you, then for those yet to come. And I learned, above all, that dignity is not discussed. Protect yourself. If you have come this far with me, thank you very much. Really, it's good to know that someone heard this story, that I didn't have to scream to be heard. Enjoy this video as if offering a tight hug, one of those that we feel in our chest, and subscribe here to the channel as if to say, I want to come back to have another coffee with you. And enjoy. Tell me in the comments of which city you are watching. I like to imagine the distance being shortened by the stories. Oh, and it activates the bell, see? That way, you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.